I'm not sure if we said it explicitly or not. Maybe the schedule wasn't that written out, but it's like the last 24 hours of this part of retreat, right? There's this sort of luxury of those longer retreats that, if one part ends, another will begin, so there's no, we don't need to think about post-retreat yet, but if we haven't announced that before, tomorrow around lunchtime we'll just transition to some little different thing. But it's, there's styles of practices that actually keep people in the dark, and there's actually power in it, right? Because it confuses the reference point. In Korea, when someone is a postulant to become a monk, for a first year, they basically wash the dishes, clean the temple, and do a lot of prostration every single day, right? Which prostrations are just like the gesture of you put your forehead on the ground, and it's just like, kind of throwing down this kind of small notion, small self, seeing its limitation, and kind of like when you lift the hands up, it's as if you kind of lift up the true nature that is kind of higher than that small mind. So you basically do that for the full year, and there's this kind of main, like, ordination ceremony, and all the postulants are coming from different monasteries to this one event, and it's maybe once a year or twice a year, and everybody's coming together, and it's a little, it's a little bit like that. I don't know, like some Navy SEAL training, or like little, like people, they do prostrations, and they make this point of not telling anyone how long the prostrations will continue, because usually, in like in a practice in a temple, you would say, like, every morning you do 808 bows in certain traditions, right? And and someone is counting it on their beads, and it takes like 15 minutes, maybe 12, depending on your speed, between 10 and 15 minutes. But it's something kind of like the mind has some reference point, like, okay, this will be that. But there they just say, okay, now everybody is doing prostration, and then everybody's just keep doing it, and you have no clue, just keep doing it, and you have no watches. Nobody has any watch, right? No, there's no clocks on the walls. But it's interesting to observe this part of us that kind of just measures everything always, and always has some reference points, because really the whole project is kind of getting out of the time, right? The sort of impression that there is something in the midst of this experience that travels through all of them, right? That's precisely the nature of identity, right? That there is something that this whole thing unfolds for, or and often that part is the part that kind of likes to anticipate, and kind of frame things, and think things in terms of time, in terms of beginnings and endings, and everything, right?
The turkeys are coming for this.
Turkeys. They came to give the Dharma talk. So sometimes, some traditional approaches are trying to find ways to checkmate that part of us, right? That wants to have some time frame. So the first teacher that I used to do retreats with was Jaksho Kwong Roshi. He was the same teacher that Adyashanti used to do his retreats with, and he has a center. He's now 90 years old, so he retired, but he used to come to Poland for a couple months every summer, and he would do month-long retreat. And he would always tell us, stories about his own teacher, Suzuki Shunryu Roshi, right, who created the San Francisco Zen Center in 1959. So he's one of the kind of pioneers of Zen in the West, you can say. And Suzuki Roshi was very, in some ways very kind and mellow when he was in the United States. He really wasn't trying to do the Japanese thing in America. But one thing that he actually did do was to kind of, he was the person in charge of meditation and everything, right, in this little center. And so he would be the one to ring the bells, even if the big monastery, of course, Abbot is not doing it, right? Like there's many different jobs and people are, doing all sorts of things. And so he would be ringing the bell. So he would make people sit, right? And usually the rounds are 40 minutes, but it's not like people are sitting in the back jacks or couches. It's you sit in a posture, which you sit kneeling on the floor or crossed legs, like in a lotus posture, or everybody sits on the floor unless you really are injured and you just can't. But for the most part, everybody's sitting on the floor, which after some time, if you have sat some retreats on the floor, it can get painful, right? Or a little bit kind of just uncomfortable. It can. And he would do this thing that he would just ring the bell, start the round, and somewhere like maybe 30 minutes in, he would just stand up and walk away from the room. And nobody knew when he would come back. And people hated it, right? Like people were just, oh man, again, this thing. And you sit there, you can't look at your watch necessarily. That's also like, and not something you do in Zen hall. And nobody would dare to stand up and like be like, oh, it's 40 minutes, I'll finish it, right? It's like, the teacher is doing it, right? So nobody was doing it. So everybody's just sitting there and just no clue when he comes back. And he wouldn't come back on time. He would definitely come back late. And he would do all sorts of things like that. He would people would sit, and let's say it's like already 50 minutes in, right, or even more, right? And one time he would come back to the room, light an incense, put another incense on the altar, and leave the room again. And everybody was just like, oh my god. That's the moment of the greatest disappointment in the history of the Zen Center. Everyone's just like, oh my god, like, what's going on? And some other time he left again, and who knows, maybe 1 hour in, he came back and he sat down, and he said those words. People recorded them. So, it's really, as he was such a soft Soto school teacher that you sometimes don't expect, but sometimes from the people you expect the least. Then it hits you, that it really kind of is impactful. So everybody was sitting there, just on the edge, just at the precipice. After long sitting, he came in, and in a really kind of loud voice, Congress was saying that he was really loud speaking, and he said, "Don't move, just die over and over again. Don't anticipate. Nothing can save you now because you have only this moment. Not even enlightenment will help you now because there's no other moments and no future. Be true to yourself and express yourself fully. Don't move." Right? It's really powerful, and in a certain way, that's the kind of essence of you can look at spiritual practices that just dying over and over again, right? As long as this I, myself, and me self-centered movement is arising, it's kind of like, time after time, it needs to be just let go of, right? It feels familiar. It feels almost dear in some way. It feels like us. Um, so in a certain way, this mind of preference that wants things this or that way is, you know, dying over and over again until it stops. Even if it doesn't stop fully, it's again, it's just like, uh, I was going to say, it's just like birds chirping outside, and you don't need to pay attention to them. But I noticed that half of people are actually watching turkeys right now, so I thought it was a bad example. I, I should maybe say something else.
Its feathers are going up.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Sorry.
No worries.
It's over there.
Yeah. No, I see another one here. Um, yeah. So that was a kind of bitter medicine, you can say, from him. And Kongroshi, he had this thing. He a little bit, maybe not in the same way, but he kind of followed a little bit that thing. And my first retreat I have ever done in my entire life, I came to the retreat at 3 p.m. I was already in the Doksan room, which, in the one-on-one meeting with the teacher. And he said, we talked just for brief moments, and then he said, over here we do this thing like in ancient China, which basically we make people sit in meditation as like a little bit of a test. So as many weeks as you have come here for, you will have to sit one day of Tangario, which is the name of it, which is kind of sitting in stillness without even, before you enter the retreat. It's this kind of period before, right? And I came for 3 weeks, so it meant 3 days, and the schedule was like this. And again, no backjacks, no sofas, no, definitely not the big bean bags, nothing, right? Just sitting on the floor, crossed legs. The schedule was like this: hour and a half of sitting straight, breakfast; 3 hours of sitting straight, lunch; 4 hours of sitting straight, dinner; and then hour and a half of sitting and then sleep. Um, and if you haven't sat ever crossed legs on the floor for longer than 1 hour or 2 hours, you have no clue. Like, what does it mean really, that cushion? Yeah, you can use a cushion. Yeah, like a meditation cushion. And you can, if you can't, hold, you can go to the bathroom. You can stand up and go to the bathroom, but come back immediately, right? So, um, of course, you could use that a little bit, right? But there's limits to that even, right? And I remember the worst part for me. I mean, it was a lot of just sitting in profound discomfort and pain. Just moments passing, right? And it's you know when things are bad, 5 minutes can feel endless, right? um, and I remember the worst moment of the whole thing was the next day, the second day in the morning, when this whole pain was building up, and I thought I'll come back on the second day in the morning and I will feel just like I felt on the first day in the morning. And I felt exactly like as I left in the evening on the first day, with the same amount of pain. I sat down on the second day in the morning, right? Just like, ooh. But the 3 days have passed, and something really, um, it was a powerful thing to go through. Even if I don't think that necessarily, I would not put people through that. And I don't think it's necessary, but it's really yeah, it really it just like forces that dropping away of that mind that has his little systems and knows when it begins and when it ends. It's just the the shadow of right of a pillar is just passing in front of you, just it's millimeter per minute or something, right? It's just, and you know that you'll be sitting here until it's dark, right? And it's just um but anyway, sometimes bitter medicine is potent medicine. It's and again, we don't need, I don't think we need to do that. It's just one of, just one kink, you can say. Like one way that's some tradition is just uh, yeah. And I think also it's important to note that this kind of practice was developed like in Asia, where actually they sit without chairs, like in the kitchen, right? Like they eat, they don't have furniture of that kind, right? They just sit on the floor. So it's also a little bit different for them. So I think it's also, there is a little bit of that mistake that sometimes Westerners do when they try, they try to keep the authentic spirit of the whole tradition, but sometimes it's like understanding the context is also, has its value. Yeah, but still, the seeing through um, that mind that tries to get the reference point, because this is the very, you know kind of foundation of that whole illusion of a subject traveling through moments and collecting experiences, right? And it all happens to that kind of thing, right? um, and in the process of unbinding, you know um, that that's what also kind of lets go at some point, that sense of continuity of experiences, right? It's as if there's like a necklace, right, with pearls, and there's like a thread called me that goes through all those experiences, right? And it just ties it all nicely together into my life. But then, it can be a little bit at first disorienting and shocking, but there can be like dropping away of that thread and seeing that the thread itself was simply just another little pearls, bubbling up, and every experience is just exploding. It is radically, like a total combustion, and then just the next moment there's something completely different, right? And there's not sense of relationship between those things, and they don't necessarily happen to a particular live stream person traveling it, right? It's just that, just those experiences unfolding, um, bubbling up and switching, and it's of course, there's like there are some, it's not like completely unworkable disjoint, right? It's their functioning happens, but yeah, it's very clear that this sense of continuity, or something traveling through timeline is not happening anymore, right? And then it's everything is fresh, right? Everything is um, fully itself, fully. It's the only thing that happens ever in the whole universe, right? When it explodes, and the next thing explodes. It's just, um, and that's, what really kind of ends, you can say, that whole leftovers of seeking energy of that spiritual progress project, right? Because it's like, it's not happening to anyone. It's not, right, like it's not, you're not trying to right now do something for any benefit in the future, even if you can plan and you can, in a relative sense everything works, but that that kind of false promise of future and some better times. It just makes zero sense, right? Because everything is just so momentary and full. um, I remember I was in my monastery in Japan, and my teacher Tangario, he was a very very special, teacher. He was extreme. I mean, there was something about him. He wasn't just like clear in his guidance or something. It was just when he came into the room, it was literally like as if sun would come out of the clouds. Like suddenly, just everything. Like his presence was just really kind of dropping you into that sense of timeless and formless and kind of radical beauty and joy of life itself, right? I mean, and he had that quality, it was very, I had practiced also with some other Japanese teachers who were like quite angry and just constantly like demanding and like thought that the way to train students is through hardship and all that. And many actually teachers in Japan have that idea, especially in Rinzai school. It's a lot of harshness there, a lot of yeah, just that whole aspect of compassion and kindness is sometimes is spoken of, but on a day to day you know reality in a monastery, it's actually it can feel quite cold and rough in some ways. It's very kind of army style. Everybody has to, every shoes has to be exactly this, the right way, everything. And if not, it's a problem, right? It's kind of training the mind to actually be mindful, but it's kind of training through saying there are consequences to every action, because and Japanese monks can be so precise, right? So of course, like, everything is plain and visible in some way. But in my teacher's temple, things were not that straight. Like he didn't care that much for things to be like perfect and immaculate clean or anything like that. It was about this kind of heartfelt commitment to awakening. That's all he cared about. um, and he so and when he was giving talks, even if it's like in Japan, it's usually not kosher, right, to look at the teacher when he's giving formal talk. You sit and you look at the floor. It's one of those cultural things, right? But I just couldn't help. I was just like staring at him all the time. He was just like beaming. He was just like he was like a black hole of some kind. Like just everything was just collapsing into him, and so I was reminded of that one moment actually when Angel was here, and there's also something special about the snow, right? And maybe also because for example, it was first time seeing snow, so they're also contagious, like uh, just but that's one of those things, right? Like the freshness of seeing something for the first time. And if everything that explodes is for the first time, right? Like that's that feeling, right? Like you basically walk around as if your first snow day. uh it's so Angel was talking about the just this oneness of in that sort of native indigenous people way of looking at things in Mexico, right? The ometeot, the kind of one thing. It reminded me exactly of that. There was one tea ceremony. Every 5 days we had this little tea thing, and then there, our teacher would give talk, uh, and it was in the kind of hall that many sides of it were windows, right? Like a window door, sliding doors, right? So you could see everything behind. And it was cold. It was January probably. So and he was sitting there, and he he always had this calligraphy of his own teacher Harada Roshi, who Angelo was quoting a couple of times during this retreat. And Harada Roshi had really wonderful, he was really skilled in the grass style of calligraphy. Grass style of calligraphy is very fluid. It's the characters are starting to lose their shape, and they're like, so when someone who really their mind is also opened, and they know how to do it. It's really, there's this aliveness in it. There's like energy in the grass style that just feels radiating with that kind of no solidity thing, right? Those Chinese characters are just like flowing uh, through the paper. So there was those byobu, right? The folded screens. So we always had the folded screen behind him for the ceremony, and he would sit, and he would give talks, and it was one of those cold January days, and the snow was falling. Um, and someone asked him, oh, that's right, it was right after New Year. So someone asked him, what does New Year means to him, right? Like, how these days it feels, right? And he starts this just absolutely amazing talk, but all he was constantly just saying, you know, um, it's just I mean, I can hear him right now, even say those things. Say in Japanese it's masarana hitokoto, which means just completely fresh one truth, completely fresh each thing arising. And he was just speaking of it, and everybody was just right there. And I would start to see, like, even Japanese monks start like turn their heads, and which doesn't happen often. Everybody's just like looking at him, and the snow was just falling and falling, and this grass style calligraphy was just like moving all behind him. And I remember this one moment he said, and this truth is, he just spread his arms, and those uh, big robe sleeved, and he would just say rododo, and he would just sing it, right? He just go on and on. It's just, and rododo means it's fully revealed right in front of your eyes, right? And when he did that, the snow start, there's this wind, the snow started to like blow, the whole snow just passing rapidly, right? It's just like everyone's just sitting there completely mind blown. And I remember talking to one of the very senior monks who was there he was there longer than I was alive. Let's put it this way, right? And I remember, and he told me, this time I looked at Roshi. We called our teacher Roshi Sama. Said I looked at Roshi Sama during his talk today, and him sitting in the robes, the calligraphy of Daiun Rodaishi behind him, and the snow passing by. Said, when I die, I would like to see that picture in front of my eyes. And I could feel how touched he was. So that was really, but that's what New Year's or ending of retreat or all those things mean to a realized person like that, right? It just means completely fresh rising. Whatever happens is just that total, free, open, one occurrence that just takes over everything, replaces everything, and then you know um, doesn't last, right? It's just a new thing just rises. So I really love sometimes reading things from long time ago, and uh, those teachings that someone said so long ago that we have nothing in common. Like, he would not understand a single thing I would tell him about the life circumstance here, like the microwave or Republican Party. Like, there's not like nothing you could say that there's, but yet when people speak of their experience, there it is. Like, it's exactly, we just, we feel that, right? Um, so in Japan, there's also there's many style of poems, right? One of them is Waka poems. Waka has, maybe Aisha knows more than me. Is it 5 5 5 7 5 7? Okay, yeah, because haiku is 575, right? So those are in Japan there are rules for everything. Poems too, but waka poems are those everybody write, many people write waka poems, right? But there's this very famous waka poem from 600s, I think, and it was called. It was written by a person who went by name Shami Mansei. Shami just means Shramanera, like the home leaver, right? This person who left home. Mansei was his name, and he wrote this poem saying, and actually it kind of opened. The first two lines are, "Living in this world, to what shall I compare it?" Right, and this became like it tends to become in Asia like a dialogue almost. Many people wait like hundreds of years apart wrote a poem that started from that, and I think he was the first. So he says, "Living in this world, to what shall I compare it? It is like a boat, rowing out at the break of the day, leaving no trace behind." Um, so something about that image really captures it, right? Sort of break of the day, right? Like when the sun is pink and it's a quiet when you are on the water, right? There's some kind of stillness, and you're kind of there's some movement too, right? Kind of traveling in some way, but then there's absolutely no trace left behind, right? Um, Everything is just disappearing, constantly disappearing. As soon as it arises, it's gone. There's new thing replacing it, just constantly, instant after instant. Um, so maybe speaking of birds, Dogen took had his take. He lived 600 years later, right? And he wrote a poem starting in the same way, and it was going, "Living in this world, to what shall I compare it? It is like a moon, reflected in a water drop falling from a beak of a waterfall. Fowl? Fowl, waterfowl, water bird. Yeah, right? So the image, he kind of, I guess he loved also the moon, right? The moon of truth, the moon of true nature shining. Um, and there's, this moment, let's say when the water bird, like seagull or something, it just dips the head into the water and just pulls up, right? And then like a couple droplets will just drop from the beak, just in this little instant before it kind of when it rises the beak and it's just the thing fall, right? So it's like um, that impermanence, right? Like how short of an instant we are here on this planet, right? How short of instant this little retreat is. It's just like it'll be gone just in a few breaths. Um, and yet in that image he also adds the the moon is just reflected for an instant, right? That moon of truth shining, and the full depth of it just in that instant is reflecting in this droplet before it just disappears. So we can explore the preciousness of that. What's happening here? It will never repeat itself. You know, um, life is always fresh, always um, arising and falling away in most unique ways. Like like every snowflake. Not as two snowflakes have ever fallen same, right? In the same pattern. They're all unique. So this limitlessness is just pervading the whole reality on all levels. So instead of thinking forward to pizza time or whatever will be happening. We can just like, enjoy and, on one hand just die over and over again, but on the other hand just reflect, express, right? I reflect that moon of true nature in every instance, in every arising, in every moment of interaction, or sitting down, or every exhale, or every sound of turkey, anything that arises.